Hey, sorry about that. I was just in the nursery, so what else are you supposed to do in the nursery? I was just taking a little nap. Actually, just was thinking about this passage in Mark chapter 13 from today's reading. So I wanted to share a couple of thoughts about that. So this is the devotional for Friday, and we were in Mark chapter 13, and I'll just read verses 32 through 37, talk about those things for a few minutes. It says, "But concerning that day or that hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Be on guard, keep awake, for you do not know when the time will come. It is like a man going on a journey. When he leaves home and puts his servants in charge, each with his work, and commands the doorkeeper to stay awake. Therefore, stay awake. For you do not know when the master of the house will come, in the evening, or at midnight, or when the rooster crows, or in the morning, lest he come suddenly and find you asleep. And what I say to you, I say to all, stay awake." It's interesting that I've mentioned many times before that when you're reading a passage of Scripture and you see a phrase repeated, that's very, very important in terms of interpreting what the passage is about. In this passage, we see this repetition. In verse 33, he says, "Keep awake." In verse 34, he says the doorkeeper to stay awake. In verse 35, he says, "Therefore, stay awake." And then in verse 37, he says, "I say to you all, stay awake." There's a lot of discussion, there always has been, about the end times. When is the end of the world coming? When is it that Jesus Christ is going to return, come to this earth, make all things that are currently wrong right again? When is he going to do that? And there's a lot in the various gospel passages that we've been reading in our Bible reading lately, where Jesus describes some of the signs of the coming of the end. And, there's, like I said, a lot of speculation. One of the most fascinating things when you think about the end times, though, is what Jesus says in verse 32 here. "Concerning that day or that hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father." Jesus here, while he was on earth, said that even he did not know when exactly that time was going to be, but only his Father. And so he gives us signs, he gives us descriptions of what kind of things to be on the lookout for, but he makes it very clear, it's very clear in the Bible, that we're not intended to speculate about when exactly these things are going to happen, when exactly Jesus is going to come back again. But what we do see many times from Jesus and from the rest of Scripture is this idea of staying awake or keeping alert. I love that phrase, stay awake. As preachers, many times we might feel the desire while we're up there preaching to look around the room and see whose eyes are closed and, shout, "Stay awake! Wake up!" It's tempting to look around and see someone whose eyes are closed, and they'll claim afterwards that they heard every word you said and they were just, being extra spiritual and praying during the sermon. And if that's you, that's okay. I mean, you know what? If you're tired and the Lord's going to give you some rest during the church service, that's okay. One of my favorite sermons I ever did was I did a message on Jesus overturning the tables in the temple, and I had a bunch of coins on a table on the stage, and actually I was in the middle of just talking about the thing, and I hadn't mentioned the table at all, and I went over and just turned the table over and made a lot of noise, and it was interesting to see there were a couple of people that kind of jerked like they were sleeping until that table got turned over. But anyway, this passage isn't really about staying awake in church, though that's something I wanted to talk about. But what Jesus says here is stay awake or keep awake. And when I think, what is it that Jesus is meaning by this? What is his desire for us when he tells us to stay awake. And in this passage, he gives a little bit of a parable when he says, it is like, or he gives a metaphor. It's like a man going on a journey when he leaves home and puts his servants in charge, each with his work, and commands the doorkeeper to stay awake. Therefore you stay awake, for you do not know when the master of the house will come. We're being reminded that we are simply servants of the Lord. In this context, of course, we're friends of the Lord. Of course, we're children of God. But in this context, we're being reminded that Jesus is the master, the Lord is our master, and we are his servants. And what does he want of his servants? While he's away, which right now he is away, of course his presence is always with us and his spirit is with us, but physically Jesus left this earth after his resurrection, ascended to his Father, and he's in heaven now, and we know he's going to come back. But while he's away, what does he expect of us, or what does he want from us? Well, he wants us to stay awake. And when I think of the contrast between being asleep or staying awake, I'm trying to understand what that means. And what I think it means the most is to be the kind of people who are paying attention. That's the idea of staying awake, of thinking the thoughts of God and not the thoughts of this world, of not getting so wrapped up in the things of this life that we lose sight of eternal things, that we get so caught up in the everyday mundane things that in the grand scheme of things don't matter, that we can easily take our eyes off of heaven, take our eyes off of eternity, and get so bogged down by this world. And if ever there was a time where that certainly would be tempting to allow that to happen, now's that time. When we look around and see all the chaos in our world around us right now, it'd be easy to get so tied up in knots about all of the bad news and all of the various things that are going on around us. But I think our Master wants us as servants to keep awake. One of the other places in the Gospels where we see Jesus asking his disciples to stay awake was when he went to the Garden of Gethsemane before he was going to go to the cross, and he was praying. And he asked his disciples to watch and pray. And when he came back, of course, they were sleeping, like oftentimes many of us are. He came back and found them sleeping and said, "Could you not even stay awake with me 1 hour?" So when I think of what does Jesus want from us as his servants, my friends, I think he wants us to be in prayer. He wants us to be about the work that he's left for us to do. When we were saved by Jesus, he could have just transported us up into heaven immediately. Beam me up, Scotty. He could have just, okay, you're saved. I don't need you on earth anymore. Let's go. But he didn't, did he? He saved us, and he's left us here. And he's not back yet. He's coming back someday, and I believe it's going to be soon. But like this tells us, we don't know when. But in the meantime, while we wait for his return, we're to be about his business. That is, telling people about the love of Jesus Christ, about the gospel message, about forgiveness of sins that's offered because of what Jesus did on the cross. Loving God and loving our neighbor. Spending time just being devoted to him, being in his presence, reading his word, being in prayer, spending time with our families, loving people well, setting an example for others of what Jesus is like, serving the church, serving the community. He wants us to stay awake, and by staying awake, I think he wants us to be doing the work that he's left us to do until he comes back. So my friends, even though there's a lot of chaos in our world, there might be a lot of upheaval even in your own heart right now. I want to urge all of us to not fall asleep at the wheel, to not fall asleep in the sense of losing sight of eternal things and getting bogged down in the things of this earth. So friends, I'll repeat it again. What I say to you, I say to all, stay awake. So, stay awake. Hope you have a great rest of your day. And I'm going to go back to my nap. Oh, just kidding. I'm supposed to stay awake. Love you guys. Have a great day.